Hello and welcome to Talking About UK Property. This is part three of obviously a three-part series, and we're interviewing Steve McDonald, a great solicitor, conveyancing solicitor from Inksters. Hi, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to ask Steve just a quick question. So this might be a shorter video, and the question is, what's the difference in sort of conveyancing practices and procedures between Scotland, England, and we'll maybe just look at Scotland and England just now. What's the big differences in the conveyancing practice?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing to note is that there are two different legal systems. That's the main thing, and people assume because we're part of the UK that we all have the same laws and everything, but the legal system is different in Scotland. So when it comes to doing conveyancing, sometimes it's as simple as terminology. We talk about missives in Scotland for the contract. So the offer, the written acceptance, and any other contractual letters that make up the deal are called missives. So once all of these conditions are agreed, at that point you have what's called concluded missives. And that's, in a nutshell, what the contract is in Scotland. In theory, and how things worked at one time was that everybody tried to get the contract concluded as quickly as possible in Scotland. And in Scotland, it used to always happen in the early weeks. You know, sometimes people would conclude contracts before mortgage offers were issued and things 25 years ago and longer. But that doesn't happen anymore because from the risk perspective, you need to know that a client's going to have a mortgage offer before you'll conclude a contract and make sure all their funding's in place and ready. So you often find that the contract part, the missives part, still is still concluded relatively late in the transaction, certainly usually in the last couple of weeks, and once the mortgage offer is issued. And so that's different from the completion date. The completion date of the transaction is the date you actually complete the sale or purchase. In England, it's slightly different because they have what's called exchange of contracts, which in Scotland, with missives, the solicitors sign all these contractual letters. In England, when they exchange contracts, as they call it, the people themselves, they meet and they actually sign the documents and they sign the contract. That often happens in the last few days of the deal. So it can be very stressful because up to the point where the exchange of contracts happens in England, as it is in Scotland with missives, any party can pull out of the deal. So we find if we're doing, for example, a deal that somebody's selling in England and buying in Scotland, which is a scenario we see quite a lot. Sometimes we're, I suppose, tearing what left of my hair out that I have, worrying about when I'm going to get missives concluded in the sale because the buyer hasn't exchanged contracts yet in England, and it's going to be the last couple of days. So everyone's on tenterhooks until the contract side is concluded. And actually, often lawyers down there won't even commit contractually until they know all the funds are there, pretty much. So you usually find that in the last couple of days of the deal is what's going to happen if you do a cross-border transaction like that, is when you get your contracts all tied up. So it's different terminology. They've got different, I suppose their system for registration and things is similar. They've had a digital registration system for years. We only brought ours in because of COVID. we used to use a paper-intensive system, but now we do electronic registration of title, which is everyone uses now, but it was forced on us really because of COVID. Whereas in England they worked that way for a long time. So I suppose it is slightly different, but it's usually most of the differences are in how the contract side is dealt with. So that's the main thing.
Which system do you think works best, Steve?
Yeah, I would say Scotland, and but I suppose there are similarities. We're getting more like the English system now because we're more cautious now about when we conclude missives in case there are issues with loan funds and things. So we tend to delay concluding missives until we're 100% certain we're going to be in funds. So that's been the big change. That change probably happened after the credit crunch, probably in 2008. There was a real sea change in how solicitors approached things then. and that tends to be how we do things now because of that. So so that's definitely been a big change in the system.
Not vastly different. Still stuff like qualified acceptance probably still happens. Property inquiries are still carried out and stuff. So sounds pretty similar. They don't use the word missives.
I don't use the word missives, and it's slightly different how the contract side works. It's like they tend to have. It doesn't have this back and forth. I suppose it's they have one contract and they basically revise all the terms between them, and eventually they just sign the same contract, and that's how it works there. Whereas in Scotland, it's a series of letters: there's an offer, an acceptance, and another acceptance, and another acceptance, then a concluding letter. It just kind of goes back and forth in Scotland, so it's slightly different how it's done. But in a nutshell, it's the same. It's just like it's a contract. It's just called a different thing.
Takes the same length of time roughly as far as you know?
Well, I think again it's all lender driven again, so it's like so it will be. A lot of the lenders we use in Scotland, the clients use in Scotland, are English lenders or UK wide lenders. So it's very similar in terms of the length of time it takes to get a mortgage offer. So there's not much difference really. Yeah.
Okay. Just that, Steve.
No worries.
Scotland and England.
Yeah.
Anything else to ask on that, Ross? You all right?
I don't think that was it. It's interesting the slight differences between the systems that are essentially the same, but it's just across the. And as you said, it must be difficult when it's a cross-border sale, which must happen a lot, especially in the towns near the borders areas.
It does. It happens a lot, and it's sometimes people just through work and things need to move areas, and if you get people who, if they're NHS or they work for banks and things, they move around all the time. So it's or people that for their careers they have to move, and that's just the way it is. So yeah, I do see it. International is slightly different, and again, every country is different. So
is there any changes on the horizon through the sort of the process of buying a property that might happen over the next couple of years?
I think we're always moving towards more automated, more electronic systems. I think one thing we have is a really archaic system in terms of signing documents in Scotland. We're still using 1991 legislation when it comes to how we sign legal documents, which is crazy. I mean, there are electronic signature options now, but it's not used in a widespread way at all at the moment. Hardly any firms. Some firms are signed up to do electronic signatures and things like that, but it doesn't really. It's not done by everybody. So I think that's one thing that has to change. There'll be more electronic signing of contracts, letters, signing of legal documents, and the way they have discharges. Somebody pays off a mortgage, you can send an electronic discharge request to Registers of Scotland, and it'll come back registered, and no one signed a document. It'll be done electronically by the lender, and ultimately, I think that's how it'll work with everything, every deed. But that's the toe in the water at the moment, is used by discharges of securities when mortgages are paid off in a sale. But I think that's how it'll work for registration of documents moving forward. We won't have wet ink signatures on everything, and documents being posted around for signature by everybody. And that's a historic situation that we're stuck with since 1991. So I think that's all going to change moving forward, and probably quite soon as well, actually, as more people adopt electronic signatures in other industries. So I think that'll happen. Yeah.
Good.
Shudder to think what it was like before 1991, but anyway, thank you. Thank you very much, Steve.
You're welcome.
Hopefully everyone.
Great, thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any comments? Anybody? You can comment on this, any of your own experiences of conveyancing. Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Cheers.